Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's frontline workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. First responders and mental health experts collaboratively created FST5 to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, as well as the chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee and a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our resident subject matter expert. Together we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. This week we celebrate National Emergency Medical Services Week, or EMS Week, an annual tribute to the contributions of EMS practitioners. Held during the third week of May, EMS Week honors the unwavering dedication, hard work, and sacrifices of these professionals. This week also serves to elevate public awareness about the critical services provided by EMS. It underscores the importance of timely emergency care and educates the community on how to respond during crises, showcasing the vital role EMS plays within the healthcare system. Ultimately, EMS Week not only honors the dedication and service of EMS practitioners, but also highlights their pivotal role in the broader healthcare system and the safety and well-being of our communities. In honor of EMS Week, we have invited Emily Bergquist to the show. Emily is the Director of the Division of EMS and Systems of Care at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. She is the first State Director of EMS in Michigan who has actually worked in the field. Emily spent nearly 20 years on the road at busy private EMS agencies, providing primary ALS and interfacility transport across large areas in Michigan. She understands firsthand the hardships that many EMS providers face throughout their careers. During this episode, Emily will help us appreciate the challenges faced by frontline workers. She will also discuss some of the nuanced challenges faced by EMS and provide recommendations for leaders to support the mental and behavioral health of their frontline personnel. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds in the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Hi, Emily Bergquist.
Hi, Jeff Lassers.
You were the very first person to record in this brand new studio, which we love. What do you think?
It's beautiful. It has a lot of sound effects and fake bricks that are nice.
Yeah.
They're nice.
Yeah, it looks
like
you
make
could
you want to pet it a little bit.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Is that felt?
Yeah.
It is now.
And look at that. Yeah. Well, it literally and figuratively.
Yeah, you could do stand-up comedy with this wall.
Yeah, you could.
It's one of those things, right?
You can practice your musical instruments.
Right.
Sing. No one will even know.
Nobody care either. Okay, let's get after it. Who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it?
I am Emily Bergquist. I am the Director for the Division of EMS and Systems of Care at the State of Michigan's Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Well, that's a fancy job. You're like a state agent. If you will.
I'm here. I work for the state. I'm here to help. I'm from the government.
Famous last words.
Yeah.
So you have a unique perspective. We're here to talk about EMS. This is the Monday of EMS week. This is a big week. And you have a very unique perspective of EMS as you were an EMS provider. You're the first state director to have that type of experience. So tell everybody what you did before you entered in the government as a state EMS official and how you worked your way up there too.
Well, I started as an EMT. I took my EMT class. Actually, I was a lifeguard when I was going to engineering school. And my boss was like, we could use some more first response type stuff in this community center in which we work. And they said, will you take your EMT class? And so I did during the off semester from regular college. And that was the end of regular college. So I dropped out of engineering school to become a paramedic instead. I then worked for almost 20 years full time on an ambulance for a private ALS ambulance company and had a catastrophic knee injury that made me kind of question how much longer my body could really do what it was doing. Fortunately, I had an agency who believed in education, and I actually had gotten a degree in the meantime. I applied for a job as the Medical Control Authority coordinator for the state office, and I guess that's how I got into this.
Right, so plenty of experiences there. And what type of system were you in?
So we did system status management. We were a single ALS agency with a lot. I wouldn't know off the top of my head how many different fire-based first response agencies we had. So I like to say we were a special microcosm. We had 2 hospitals when I first started, and then one of the hospitals closed. So it was one hospital, one ALS agency, and a lot of first responders. So we all knew each other. We all worked together. We were high volume. You know, some days you do 20 to 23 calls in a 24-hour shift. But it is an interesting situation to not be in a place where there's competition or, you know, any sort of real questions about boundaries or anything like that. So I have learned something almost every day, I think, about, you know, what my system was and what everybody else's systems are from the very corners of our state up into the Upper Peninsula and everything in between.
Okay, so that's what we're getting into today, is that big spectrum of what EMS is. It's not as obvious as the fire department protects people from not only fires, but a lot of times they're integrated in first response to medical emergencies. Either way, you call, they show up and provide care. EMS does the same thing, but they also are responsible for moving patients from facility to facility, facility to home. There's all these different things, and it's a lot different. So from your perspective, how do the challenges faced by EMS compare to the fire, law enforcement, 911 dispatchers, and corrections? How are they really different? Give them your side of that.
So I think there are universal truths, right? Like being your job and being your work. That, I think, permeates across all of the public safety type agencies and career paths. But EMS is just a little bit different because a lot of the people connect very passionately, whether they're fire-based or private, with their patients. So when you're fighting a fire, you're fighting a fire. It is not a person. It is not necessarily something that you're attached to. Where EMS, whether that person is, I can think of, you take the same person to dialysis 4 times a week for 6 years. And you establish this kind of rapport with them, and they become like family to you. That also takes a piece of you at the same time, because you know that that person that you take to dialysis 4 times a week for 6 years is not going to be around forever. They're not going to dialysis 4 times a week via ambulance because they're healthy and they're just going to like hop up and be well one day. So I think that adds a different dynamic than necessarily law enforcement or fire, is because you have more relationships with the people that you serve that are more direct than you might get in a fire only or a police only or corrections or 911.
So help our audience who don't really understand the big spectrum of EMS, how different it is from where I work, primary 911, fire-based EMS, municipal, to other counties that have single agency ALS systems or everything in between. Help everybody understand that, because I don't take people to dialysis. Sometimes I respond to a dialysis emergency at a facility and then we transport to a hospital. But that's kind of what I'm speaking to. There's a whole other angle of EMS, and sometimes it's not just the individual traumatic heavy calls. It's either chronic fatigue from back-to-back calls or the connections you make with patients you see for a long time that can eat at you when they're no longer on your route.
Well, and I think it's also like the roller coaster ride that is that transition between.
Yeah.
So when you come to work and you're working in a system status management type system, so you come into work, you get your vehicle, you might have some 24-hour stations in your area, but there's also 12-hour or 10-hour cars. You get your vehicle, and your communication center will send you where you are, quote unquote, most likely to see a call. And then they move you according to how many ambulance you have available, where calls are happening at any given point in time, if they anticipate, 6 transfers coming out in the next 4 hours. And you're really like in that vehicle waiting for something to happen. You don't go to a station. You don't work on your station duties. You are kind of in that, 20 by 6?
Maybe.
From the front to back.
Yeah,
20 by 6.
But your living quarters.
You're in the front seat of that vehicle for, however long that takes. And you might be, in the system that I worked, our primary county was one, but our company also covered the adjacent ones. So if they were short in another county, we might be studying up real fast to get shipped east or west. So that piece is a nuanced difference. And then, there's also the systems where we still have folks in Michigan that work on the ambulance, but they're at home or at their full-time jobs. And the only people who come when somebody calls 911 are coming from their house or their other job. And tones drop and their pagers go off and they go get an ambulance and go to get the patient. So it's like we have everything from, fire-based services who are in a station 24/7. I don't know what else to say other than waiting, but you're not really waiting. You have lots of other things to do, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're prepared.
You're preparing, you're doing your other work, but you're, present and you have a physical space. You might, be working on a project or studying or working out at the gym. Yeah, you have a little gym that's available to you, all of those things. And then you have, somebody who's in an ambulance for 12 hours straight. And then you have people who are being accountants or teachers or any number of other things that are also still serving their community and ready to drop something at any point in time. So that part is, I think, a little bit of an interesting spectrum. And then the other thing that you were asking about like, what are the other things? You might go and pick up a patient and take them to the VA in Milwaukee, for example. You might be gone all day taking somebody to a really long away place or the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic or wherever, because here in Michigan, whatever resources aren't available. You might be, doing 911 calls just like a regular day, and you might be doing patients who can't go by car and are medically necessary to go by ambulance back and forth to dialysis appointments. And those happen back to back to back. So you go pediatric cardiac arrest, 64-year-old dialysis patient. Maybe you want to go to Milwaukee today, and all of those things can happen in succession. And that piece of you never really know, and you're going from one complete kind of mundane routine thing to something completely unpredictable is, I think, one of the challenges as well.
Absolutely. When and how did you realize that behavioral and mental health issues are real life concerns for frontline workers?
I'm old, right? I'm an old EMS person. I'm not a, 50-year person, but I've been around for a while. And when I started, there was really, and it still exists today. I shouldn't pretend like it's fixed, right? But the, suck it up, buttercup, this shouldn't affect you kind of attitude is that was how I was educated. And I actually had a pretty significant incident with 4 pediatric arrests in a car accident with the mom, and it was
enough said.
Catastrophic. Just absolutely catastrophic. And I was having a very hard time. I was having a very hard time sleeping and functioning and, existing in the universe. And one of the peer support folks was like, I don't understand why you think you should. Because I was like, I should just be able to keep going. Like, I should be able to just keep going because I've always just kept going. And that's what we do. We just continue. We continue and it will be fine. And, you don't let it affect you and you keep going. And she said, that isn't even a scenario I would make up for school. Why would you think that it wouldn't affect you in the way that it's affecting you? Like, you have to kind of get over yourself a little bit. You are not a superhero. Your magical skill is not somehow not having any emotional relation to anything that's happening around you. And that was like the moment where I was like, yeah. Okay. And it took me months, of therapy and really reconsidering what actually I was capable of. And, I worked for several more years on the ambulance after that. But there was this moment where I thought, I can't. Like, if I can't compartmentalize myself, and if something's going to affect me, I should just not do it anymore. And that's really unfortunate. That was the mindset that I was taught to have, was that we should not be affected. And if it was affecting you, then that was a flaw. Like, that was your personal flaw, and that you should absolutely, either A, get over it, or B, get out.
Yeah.
That attitude, and that's the way I was taught. It does still exist. I still see it.
Yeah.
I still see it. It's less than, through projects like this.
They're not as loud.
Yes, they're not
as loud. They're not
empowered
to be as loud, and they don't have as many people like, yeah. It's usually just one or two rather than a group.
Yeah, and I feel like the wave of change, is kind of drowning out those voices as well. But so that's like my own personal journey to how I realized. But I think that there are other pieces as well. Like I said, years of therapy. And I think everybody who probably listens to this podcast knows that I read a lot of behavioral health books, and I read a lot about first responder mental health and how we deal with it. And it's been kind of rearranging my life to make sure that I am also supporting my own needs, as opposed to you just keep going. Like, sometimes you need to reset, and that doesn't mean, walking away and just being done with it, but like, maybe you don't work 108 hours in a week.
That's reasonable.
Maybe you take a vacation with your family.
Also reasonable.
Maybe you spend 6 hours on your Saturday reading a book or, watching your favorite TV show, as opposed to like pushing yourself to now also volunteer as the Boy Scout camp as the first responder.
Right.
Like,
because they needed it.
Yeah.
And you were available, and you're like, I have 7 minutes.
Exactly. Like, it's important. Lots of things are important.
Everything's important.
But so also are you.
Yes.
And that piece of it, I think, is really hard for first responders to get to in every single avenue of like, well, there will be one less ambulance. And then my friends who I care about and I love, like my family, will be busier and more tired. But I am already tired.
Right.
So I think that's kind of how I've gotten there. Like, unfortunately, it took me realizing that I wasn't taking care of myself to get to the point where I realized that everybody wasn't taking care of themselves.
Right.
And so this is why, when we write the Wednesday update and things like that, and people are like, wow, I can't believe you put that in there. I'm like, well, somebody's got to talk about it. But I think about, like, if we could change our system so that people were more willing to say out loud, I'm having a hard time. I need you to, give me a minute. And if we had leaders who then said, okay, you need time, we'll get you time. And it's not perfect and it's really hard to do. But maybe if more voices were talking about that, we would have less people who felt alone.
We wouldn't put an ambulance on the road that was 30,000 miles overdue on its shocks, brakes, and engine oil.
Right.
We would never do that. In
It's
fact,
not
there's
safe.
probably like a law against it.
There are rules for sure.
Sure. But we don't measure the impact of calls and just hours on the job on first responders. We just don't.
Well, and all of the pieces around their job.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like what percent did you come to work today? That was something interesting that I read in a book. Was a couple actually who would sit down and talk about, together we have to be 100%, kind of like you and your partner. Together you have to be 100%. And if one of you shows up with 20 and the other one comes up with 80, then you're probably okay.
Yeah.
But if both of you are at 20,
Yeah, we're screwed.
we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And if we're not looking at each other and I come in here and say, Jeff, I'm at 60% today. Do you have 40 to give? You know, then if you're like, no, I don't have 40, then we have to have a conversation. But those conversations I don't think are really happening yet.
Right. Well, it's a two-part thing. Some people want to look at those conversations as a way out for people to do work. And I look at them as opportunities to give those people resiliency and coping skills.
Right.
Because I don't think anybody wants to do a bad job.
No, yeah.
And some people are lazy. Some people are dumb. Some people just need a hand. Now, I'm willing to bet that about 80% of the people that are out there just need a hand. And I bet you there's 20% that are going to either game the system or be lazy. But there's still 80% of those people that we can keep giving resiliency to, so that we can keep equaling at least 100% together.
Yeah, like together. We can, like, that's...
Right. It's the conversation
yeah.
of like, dog, I'm having a day. Here's what's going on at home. You just got to help me out here a little bit. Like if my arm was hurting and we have to pick up the next patient, you'd probably take the heavy end of the cot.
Yeah.
Give me a break. It's the same thing.
It is
Just
exactly
give me
the
a little
same thing.
break. You don't want me walking around in a sprained ankle. I'm going to become a bigger liability to you.
That's right.
As an agency.
That's exactly. You do not want that.
It's just it's harder to objectively measure that.
Right.
And
Right.
it's harder for a lot of people to accept that somebody might be hurting because they don't think they're doing their end of being resilient, or they're not doing their end of taking care of themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes it's true, but a lot of times those people just need more help.
Right. Well, and we all come with our own history. All of the history that you bring with you builds up to your capacity, right? Like, some people are really naturals at IV starts, and I remember teaching and being like, I don't have any idea how you're doing that. Like, that you're not doing it in the way that anybody would ever think is a good idea, but you are, like, 100% successful with your weird, you know, like, I don't know, so the Bane gods talk to you or whatever. Like, people come with these pieces, and other people have capacity reductions, and it could be because of like issues with their childhood or an unstable home environment, or they're going to school to be a paramedic at the same time as they're working full-time as an EMT, and they're also trying to pay their bills, and they're really, you know, like, what I have now is not what I had when I was an EMT working on the ambulance. And I don't think that we should all expect everyone to be able to cope the same way we do, I guess, is my point. Like, there are times in my life where, you know, $30 would have been like, I don't have $30. You know, I don't have it. And there have been times in my life where if you had told me one more bad thing, I would have like laid down on the ground and cried, because my window of tolerance is like the size of a
you can only take
marble.
so much. You're a
Exactly.
person.
Like you're full, and everybody's, what they come in with is different. And that's okay.
Right.
It's okay.
Right. And it's unique in the fact that in the front line, we're not just going to work. And I'm not saying it's just having a duty that isn't public service isn't real work. There's a lot of really hard, really big jobs that take a lot of brain power. But when you have the stress of the community in your hands, or the people you've connected with that rely on you, it adds this other layer that I need to be so much on top of my game that it's nearly a sin for me not to be.
Right. Someone's
Whereas-
going to die.
Yeah, it could be bad.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, the balcony view has gotten higher and higher and higher through your chain of coming off the road and then not only going into the office, but into government work of actually working in EMS systems, seeing that they're different everywhere. And not only the systems, but the people couldn't be more different in EMS either. I mean, geez, there's not one of the five that have such a difference in human beings that occupy that spectrum of just EMS. So there's a lot of different types of EMS providers. That means there's a lot of different types of EMS agencies and leaders and policymakers. So based on your experience, how can policymakers, frontline leaders, and departments best support the mental and behavioral health of their personnel?
I think number one is, it's not even acceptance. It's like embracing the concept that a whole human is made of mental and behavioral health. I think about when I went and applied to work at an agency, I had to do all of these physical things, right? I had to do CPR for 10 minutes, and I had to carry heavy things up and down stairs, and all of these different things that I had to do. But no one once ever talked to me about what my personal coping skills were. What are the things that I came with, so that they had a baseline understanding of, like, are you here on a personal mission to save the universe because, EMS saved your dad? And, like that's important information for a leader to understand about how their people are made. What are you bringing with you? Either rocks in your backpack
or rocket ships.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's those are, and not to say that that's like a discrimination point. It's just, it's information.
It certainly applies, because you're going to have somebody who's going to be in a lot of situations that you need to make sure they're in the best situation for them to handle it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get rid of these people. It's just like, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? That's like leadership 101, right?
Right. And putting that into the bucket of things that can be in there, right, without immediately going, well, they're whatever behavioral health slur you want to insert.
Right. Right.
Behavioral
health slur. I like that.
There's a lot of things that we've said about behavioral health patients over the years, right?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, you do not want to be, leaders have got to get over that. Yeah. And I have a whole presentation I do about bias, and this is one of the things where you think about, you go back to the beginnings of EMS and fire and police, and like, who were the leaders? And those leaders have a tendency to hire and promote people who are the same as them. And then those people hire and promote those people who are the same as them.
Yeah.
And so we see this.
Or at least see things the same
yes,
as them.
Exactly. So like, whatever that sameness, it's an affinity bias. It's like, I want to surround myself with people who support me and, make me feel better about the things that I do, because leading challenging people is hard. It's hard work. So we see this over and over again. And so we see this perpetuation of a mindset of behavioral health is a fault. It's not a part of a disease process like asthma. Like somehow an asthma patient is like more desirable. If you come with asthma, then we're going to provide you these accommodations. Or if you're allergic to popcorn, we're going to never have popcorn in our stations. But like, we don't actually care if you had some sort of adverse child event, and now we should be more thoughtful about how we deal with you if you have an incident that's similar to your own. So like, that is, I think, paramount for all of leadership, because you're not going to fix it, right? Like, there's no everyone gets to go home from work because some terrible thing happened, because people have to continue to work. But understanding where people are coming from and providing them with tools in their toolbox in order to be able to cope better, that's where they all have to start.
That's great. I like that a lot. Would you say that it's not on leaders to make you strong, but to make sure they give you enough access to resources or people that can help you along your own personal path? Because it's not the job of administration to make you healthy. It's a personal accountability. But at the same time, if that person's not recognizing it, they certainly could have some responsibility, or maybe adopt a little responsibility on saying, when I recognize this, the first step is maybe approaching that. Now, as a leader, it could be hard, because you may not feel that person's going to open up to you, or you may not want them to, or vice versa, but you want them that outlet. So like, that's why we have peer support teams. Right. Designated people trained to have those conversations, to maybe identify people that could use a hand. Sometimes it's literally just, hey man, you need a hang.
Right.
That's it. You just need to hang. Some people need guidance. They don't even know where to start, and they need therapy.
Right.
Or whatever. Or find out what's going on with them, and why things are coming up or being worsened. And then from there, we have clinical therapists. We have very good treatments available to us, and making sure your personnel know what they are, know how to access them, and just getting out of the way. And then from there, making sure there's the real bad stuff available. If one of my guys or girls, God forbid, becomes addicted to anything for any reason, what do I do? Not legality, not liability. Where can I get them healthy? There's treatment, there's recovery. I need a plan for that.
Yeah, and this is when you like, can a leader make you be strong? The answer is no. It's kind of like physical therapy, if you think about it.
Yes.
Like physical therapists don't do anything to you, really. They might like give you exercises to do and
a little
teach
rub
you,
here and there.
Yeah, teach you how to do that and teach you how to make whatever that is you're having therapy on stronger. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Just like you'd have physical therapy, you can have.
You're so right. Because they tell you, like, you did something to this when you were 14. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I had a childhood trauma. I fell down and out of a tree,
exactly.
right?
Like whatever that thing is that's driven you to where you are and in the situation, whatever that piece is that's like, why is this bothering me so much? And that's what the professionals do. They're like, I know that you don't see this, but also there's this direct line between this other thing that's bringing that back up, even though you don't see it. Whether it's sometimes it's like smells, there's all these different things.
Strongest sense related to memory.
Yeah, it's like all of these different things that can happen. So no, I don't think that leadership, like I can't make somebody get better, but I can pay attention enough to know when someone is struggling,
Care enough.
Yeah. Like, yeah, you can't, one of the books that we are reading right now is about feedback, and you can't really fake it because people see it. Then you come off as condescending or patronizing because people can tell because somebody told you needed to say that.
Right.
Not because you actually care anything
and then
about
you'll
what
get in
happens
trouble
to
if
me.
you don't actually say it, so you're just covering your end of the bargain.
Exactly.
Right.
But to your point, there should be, it's like preparedness plans and SOPs and policies and all that jazz. So, like, what is the thing? And we've actually been talking about this in my office. Like, what are the things that we do? So, like, when we hear about some sort of critical incident in our community, then what do we do next? Or what are we doing for our people? And so, like, my boss and I have had many conversations about, like, okay, well, what are the the steps that we do? And one of them is we always call Frontline Strong to make sure that they're aware of whatever the situation is that has come into our office and we've been made aware of. That's one of the things that we do. We contact Frontline Strong. It helps us because there was a period there where we had, I don't know, I think it ended up being 7 EMS deaths by suicide in 5 months. And one of them was one of my previous students. And it was, I remember standing in the hallway and just in our office and just being like, this can't be how we continue. And so, like, even at the state office, we have a plan for, who do we talk to and, what resources do we access and how do we make sure that, like, the fallout, at least whatever resources that we can bring to bear are available. And so every agency should have something like that. And not every agency is going to have all of the resources. All of them can have Frontline Strong.
And that's the key, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things is, like, if you don't, where do I get it? Well, there's this big, giant network you can just plug into.
Right.
And they'll either give you the resources or handle it. And Michigan is, like, leading the way nationally, in my opinion.
Yeah, nobody has anything.
Nothing.
I mean, I just got back from the National Association of State EMS Officials Conference, and I can tell you nobody else has this kind of thing. This is a special thing that we're very fortunate to have, and I hope it continues forever.
Well, me too.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm, like, one of the podcast guys, because I really think it's amazing. I'm watching it help people. And it's been incredible to just know that at least one person I know. Right? And it's been a bunch more. But it's the whole just help one person thing, it's really become true.
So I was thinking the theme for this week is, like, remembering our past and forging for the future, something along those lines. I'm going to get in trouble because I said that incorrectly. But when we talk about, like, EMS 2050, there's nothing in EMS 2050 that's like, I get to do all these really cool skills and I can do impossible tasks. Everything about EMS 2050 is about the human component.
And what is EMS 2050?
It's the EMS agenda for the future.
It's essentially the roadmap of how
It
EMS
is.
in the United States is going to march forward.
Hopefully.
Well, like
It's
a
the
roadmap.
dream. Yeah, it's like the dream.
Avalanches happen down the road, right?
Yeah.
COVID could come up again.
That's right.
Just to say, but it's a way that the national EMS culture at the administrative level can get together and create that roadmap. So please tell
Yeah.
what's in the 2050 document
So
related to this.
it's a person-centered document, which is different than any of the. There's been several versions, and every version has been like, shiny. I say shiny.
We remember
objects.
the 2020 one.
Exactly, and then it really all came from the original white paper in the 1960s and 70s, but it kind of flipped. And now it's talking about person-centered. It's person-centered care. It's taking care of your people. The most important thing you have is you, like your person and everything that makes you you. And that's, some of you are like really, really funny. And some of you are super smart. And some of you are really good at art. And all of those things are all part of what make you good at your job, which also means that you have to maintain those other pieces of you. Like, don't get lost. Don't get lost. That's what I'll say. Don't get lost in being a paramedic or being an EMT or being a medical first responder. You can't let that be the only thing that you are, because if you do, the second something goes wrong in that space, everything else falls apart. So it's kind of like in the puzzle that is you as a person, make sure that there's other pieces in play and you're paying attention to those, whether it's hobbies or relationships or talents or any of those things, all make you actually better at what you do because they fill you up. And that is, I guess, what I'll say. Don't get lost. Be you, your whole self.
Great words for a great ending. Thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We'll see you soon.
All right. See ya.
Thank you for joining us on the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.